Let's start here. It's February 1847. We're high in the Sierra Nevada mountains. The entire world is silent, buried under more than 20 feet of snow. And down below, you can just barely make out these crude little cabins. They're almost invisible, just dark holes in a sea of white. This is where the American dream came to die. When the first rescue party finally broke through, this is what they found. The survivors, they were skeletal, barely even human. And all around them was just gruesome evidence of the ultimate taboo. We're talking half-eaten bodies lying on every side. The horror was absolutely unimaginable. And that's the question that just hangs over this entire story, right? How did respectable, ordinary families, people full of hope and ambition, end up in this frozen hell, forced to make the most unthinkable choices imaginable? Well, to find the answer, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. Okay, let's rewind. It's the spring of 1846 in Springfield, Illinois. The snow is gone, and there's this feeling of warmth and optimism in the air. At this point, we're not looking at victims. Not yet. We're looking at ambitious pioneers, people ready to bet it all on a new life out west. And you've got to get to know these people, because they weren't desperate. You have the Donner brothers, who were prosperous farmers. Then there's the Reed family, so wealthy they traveled in this custom-built two-story wagon. They actually called it the Pioneer Palace car. And you have the Breens, a devout, hardworking family just looking for a better future. They were, for all intents and purposes, the American dream in motion. Now, you have to understand the powerful idea that was just sweeping the nation at the time. It was called manifest destiny, this belief that Americans had a God-given right to the entire continent. And California? California was the ultimate prize. It was described as a new Eden, a land of perennial springtime. This California fever, as they called it, was this intoxicating pull they just couldn't resist. In every tragedy, there's always that one moment of fatal temptation. For the Donner Party, it came in the form of a man named Lansford Hastings and his best-selling guidebook. In it, he promised a secret, a shortcut he claimed would shave 300 to 400 miles off the journey, a whole month of travel. Think about that. So here's the crucial point. They had a choice. There was the main trail. It was longer, yeah, but it was proven, it was safe. And then there was the Hastings cutoff. It was a promise, a gamble. And here's the really damning fact. Hastings himself had never actually taken wagons on this route. He was selling a fantasy. And look, they were warned, explicitly. An experienced mountain man, James Clyman, told James Reed directly to stick to the known path. But Reed, confident, ambitious, he just dismissed the advice. He believed there was a nigger route, a better way. This was their first, and you could argue their most critical mistake. A choice born not out of desperation, but of hubris. So on July 19th, 1846, they reached that fork in the road at the Little Sandy River. Most of the other wagons went right, onto the safe route. The Donner Party turned left. This was it. This was the point of no return. Every single horror that followed began with that one fateful turn. And the shortcut almost immediately became a total nightmare. First, they spent 16 agonizing days, 16, just hacking a road through the Wasatch Mountains. Then came the Great Salt Lake Desert. Hastings had claimed it was about 40 miles. It was 80. It took them 5 brutal days to cross. They lost cattle, they had to abandon wagons, and they lost a full, irreplaceable month. And, this kind of pressure, it doesn't just drain your supplies. It absolutely shreds the social fabric. Tempers freed, and then they finally just snapped. During a struggle to get some wagons up a steep hill, a driver named John Snyder got into a violent argument with James Reed. Snyder strikes Reed with his whip handle, draws blood. As he goes to strike him a second time, Reed reacts and stabs Snyder with a hunting knife. Snyder was dead. The camp just descended into chaos. Was it self-defense? Was it murder? They ended up compromising. Reed wasn't hanged, but he was banished. Forced to leave his family and ride on completely alone. They had just exiled one of their most capable leaders. The battered party finally limps back to the main trail, only to learn the shortcut was actually 125 miles longer. So now it's late October, and they are in a frantic race against the weather, with the huge Sierra Nevada mountains looming ahead as the final barrier. They were so close.
As they reached the foot of the final pass, it happened. An unseasonably early, massive blizzard hit. And we're not talking about a light dusting of snow. This first storm dumped 5 feet of snow. 5 feet! It completely buried the trail and all of their hopes. They had no choice but to retreat back down to a lake and make a desperate camp. And then it got worse. A few days later, a second storm hit. This one lasted for 8 solid days. When it finally cleared, the pass was buried under more than 10 feet of snow. The mountains weren't just an obstacle anymore. They were a prison. They were trapped. Thanks to a diary kept by a man named Patrick Breen, we know the agonizing details of what came next. First, they ate their oxen. Then, their dogs. When those were gone, they started boiling the ox hides from their roofs into this foul, gelatinous glue. They were chewing on twigs, eating mice. Starvation began to claim them one by one, starting with the elderly and the very young. By mid-December, a group of the 17 strongest members decided on a desperate gamble, an absolute Hail Mary. They would try to walk out on snowshoes to get help. This group became known as the Forlorn Hope. Their 33-day journey was a descent into pure hell. They got lost, they ran out of food, and soon people began to die. And it was here that they made that grim pact to eat the bodies of the dead to survive. After unimaginable suffering, 7 of them, just 7, finally reached a settlement and triggered the rescue. 4 separate relief parties fought their way into the mountains, and the scenes they discovered, well, they would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The final rescuer found a man named Louis Keseberg, all alone in a cabin, surrounded by dismembered bodies, with a pot of human organs boiling over a fire. He became the ultimate villain of the story. But, amidst all that darkness, there was also incredible heroism. A rescuer named John Stark refused to abandon a group of children at what became known as Starved Camp. He single-handedly carried and guided 7 of them to safety, an incredible act of humanity. And then there's this incredible little story. When 8-year-old Patty Reed's family had to abandon their wagon, she was told to leave all her toys behind. But she secretly hid this tiny 4-inch doll in her dress. Through the starvation, the death, the terror, she protected that one small symbol of home and childhood, and it survived the entire ordeal with her. So we come back to that big question. Why did this happen? And the truth is, it wasn't just one thing. It was a cascade of failure. First, you have their own fatal choice, a choice born of hubris. Second, you have just terrible luck and timing. They ran headlong into one of the worst winters on record. And third, you have the brutal reality of human nature under extreme pressure, which led to social breakdown and eventually the ultimate taboo. The survival data is actually fascinating. Women survived at a higher rate than men, and that's likely because they had higher body fat reserves. But the single greatest factor in survival wasn't individual strength. It was being part of a family unit. Families shared resources, they shared warmth, they shared support. In the end, it was the strength of the pack that mattered most. The final cost was just staggering. Of the 87 people who took that shortcut and got trapped in the snow, only 48 made it out alive. Their story became this dark, cautionary tale in the grand story of America's westward expansion. And it leaves us all with this really deeply unsettling question. They were chasing a dream that led them straight into a nightmare, a place where the only way to live was to do the unthinkable. And it forces us to ask ourselves, freezing, starving, watching our families die, what would any of us do to survive?
And so, another chapter closes. For more journeys into history's forgotten files, please like and subscribe. Your next story awaits.